Michael? Okay, thank you. Okay, just to remind members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. Please note that there might be a slight delay when moving between public and private sessions, so I ask members to be patient. Been asked to remind members to be conscious that the new audio and video equipment in committee rooms is significantly sharper than it had been. This means that, for example, when a committee meeting is in public session, side conversations are increasingly likely to be picked up by the microphones, and obviously the video is also much sharper as well. Have we anybody in the public gallery? Nobody outside? No? Let in. I would remind everyone too that photographs or recordings of the meeting are not permitted. Members, last week we did our public declaration of interests. I would request that you, going forward, you declare any new interests as relevant matters under discussion, particularly if there's anything comes up in the business. Okay. Apologies. We have an apology from Michelle McElveen, and Michelle is unwell, so we wish her a speedy recovery. Any other apologies? No. Okay, draft minutes. I refer you to the draft minutes dated the 15th of February 2024, which is in your pack, pages 10 to 17. Are there any comments on the content of the minutes?
No.
Okay, members, are we agreed that we sign them through record?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay, agenda item 3, Chair's business. At each meeting there is potential for Chair's business, which are issues that are drawn to my attention by the clerk, external organisations or other committee chairs, or an issue to be raised out of the committee chairperson's liaison group, or invitations or events. There are 5 items today. Members, on Tuesday, the Vice Chair, Clerk and myself held an informal meeting with the Minister, Minister Andrew Muir, the Permanent Secretary, Katrina Godfrey. A very constructive introductory meeting, and we conversed on a lot of issues right across the ERA remit, including budget pressures, Lough Neagh, Climate Change Act, progress and impact of scientific solutions, the economic and social value of rural support. Overall, a consensus was that we cannot allow the committee to be drawn into a climate and environmental issues versus farming and agriculture issues. The clerk will draw up a short briefing note for next week's pack. Declan, have you anything to add about that meeting?
I just want to echo your comments, Chair. It was a very constructive meeting. Broad range of issues were discussed, and I do believe the Minister is very much in listening mode, so I welcome that, and it was a good start.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody any comments? I know it was only Declan, the clerk, and I, but it was quite a good meeting. And look, yes, the Minister reiterated on a number of occasions that he's assessing a lot of things, you know, and obviously assessments will not go on forever, so we'll be in planning and proposals, and I would imagine the not too distant future around some of these issues. So that's positive. Okay, members, as you know, we were due to have Minister Muir attend our meeting next Thursday along with the Permanent Secretary. However, due to a number of timing issues of the executive meeting over the next few weeks, he is unable to attend on a Thursday morning. He has offered to attend on Tuesday afternoon to give us adequate time, and the clerk has provisionally booked the afternoon of Tuesday the 5th of March in room 30 from 2:15 to 3:45. I know it's sitting day, it's plenary day, but and that may be subject to change depending on what comes on the agenda. So can I ask that we're content with that for now, subject to any significant change. Is that okay? Thank you. Members, I refer you to pages 6 to 7 of your pack regarding an invitation to attend the Northern Ireland Food and Drink Awards 2024 on Friday the 15th of March in the Crown Plaza Hotel, Shaws Bridge, Belfast. If it's okay with members, I hope to attend that, if that's all right. Is that okay? Yeah. Members, I refer to pages 8 and 9 of your pack regarding an invitation from Playboard NI to attend the launch of Adapt My Play in the Long Gallery on the 4th of March at 11 a.m. Diary permitting, I plan to attend that as well. Are members content?
Yep.
I'm assuming that's open to the pub or to the wider membership.
Yeah, I presume so.
members?
It's just the
So,
invitation came
yeah.
into you, yes.
Okay. Members, I would like to get your opinions on the use of WhatsApp group to communicate during meetings or to use for urgent matters. Also, if members wish to use a Teams chat function during the meeting. My personal view at this stage, members, is that we should only use WhatsApp, but we should have a WhatsApp group, but only use it for urgent matters. For example, change in room of committee room or committee times or arrangements for visit. And I don't propose that we should use Teams chat at all during meetings.
Good idea.
If that's okay. Is all content?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
What's that?
Okay, agenda item 4 is Legacy Report 2017 to 2022. Members, I refer you to the clerk's briefing note at pages 18 to 23 of your pack and the ERA Committee Legacy Report at pages 24 to 64 of your pack. The clerk's briefing summarises the main points of the Legacy Report, which sets out the key activities, outputs and achievements of the previous committee and also highlights a range of issues that it believed this committee may wish to take account of when considering its priorities. Members, we may wish to include some of these matters when considering the draft forward work programme over the next few weeks. Are you content to note this paper at present? Obviously we may have to return to it at stages, but I didn't see anything significant unless anybody picked up anything. I know, Declan, you were chair in the last committee, so maybe if there's anything you pick up, you know, that you feel particularly you would want to have addressed, maybe we can include it. Is that fair? And same to all members, but I'm particularly highlighting Declan as being the previous chair.
Yeah, there's a number of things there, like for example, that we did in the last term. I'm just thinking of the breaking the grass ceiling, but the role of women in agriculture, for example, and perhaps there's that's something we maybe want to pick up as the mandate progresses.
Okay. That's fine, but for now we're happy to leave it in the pack and anything that comes up. Is that fair? Okay. Okay, members, we'll now move into private session to consider the committee induction plan and committee procedures in our
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Signed. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound.
We have a briefing from the department, so I'm assuming that we're back on live session. So this is agenda item 6, department ERA briefing from senior officials. So very warm welcome to our first departmental officials here at the ERA committee in this session. To Mr Brian Doherty, Deputy Secretary of Strategic Planning and Corporate Services, and to Mr Roger Downey, Director of Finance. So I'll leave it over to you, and following that, I'm sure you'll be open to some questions from members, if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
Just to refer members to the letter from the DALO briefing on the budget bill and finance update on page 150 of your pack. Also, a committee briefing on the budget bill is at pages 151 to 152 of your pack, and at Annex B, the overview of the 2023-24 financial position at pages 153 to 167. And also refer you to the table papers pack starting at page 3 from the department of the first day briefing papers, which set out the background information on the remit, structure and functions of the department. And part 2 identifies the key issues it faces. The clerk has also issued these by email on Monday evening. So just if you haven't read all those, don't start reading them. Please listen to the department officials. It'll be much easier to follow. So again, over to you, to representatives. Thank you.
So good morning, Mr Chairman and committee members, and can I thank you for the opportunity to undertake this briefing today. As you, Mr Chairman, have noted, I am one of the Deputy Secretaries in the department where I jointly head the Strategic Planning and Corporate Services Group, and Roger is our Finance Director, and he's also part of the senior management team in the group. This is the first of a number of departmental briefings that will take place over coming weeks. I have no doubt you're absolutely enthralled. I propose to split, with your agreement, Mr Chairman, this briefing into 3 sections. Firstly, an overview of the department, then some detail on the work of the group that I jointly lead, and then a finance briefing which will be led by Roger. So the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has responsibility for food, farming, environmental, fisheries, forestry and sustainability policy and the development of the rural sector in Northern Ireland. The work of the Department touches the lives of everyone in Northern Ireland on a daily basis, and staff play a key role in supporting the agri-food sector, our environment, our rural communities and the broader community. The Department leads on the Executive's climate change agenda, working with all Northern Ireland Civil Service departments and sectors to develop and implement Northern Ireland's first climate action plan and reduce carbon emissions. It assists the sustainability of development of the agri-food, environmental, fishing and forestry sectors of the Northern Ireland economy, having regard to the needs of the consumer, the protection of human, animal and plant health, the welfare of animals and the conservation and enhancement of the environment. It provides a business development service for farmers and growers and a veterinary service for administration of animal health and welfare, and delivers training, further and higher education courses in the agri-food sector. The current vision of the Department is sustainability at the heart of a living, working, active landscape valued by everyone. The Department is led by Minister Muir. The Minister is supported by the Department's Permanent Secretary, Katrina Godfrey. Katrina is the Minister's most senior advisor and is also the Departmental Accounting Officer, personally responsible for ensuring that public money is being spent and accounted for properly in line with the obligations of managing public money in Northern Ireland. Katrina chairs the departmental board, which supports her in her leadership role, ensuring that the necessary high standards of governance, planning and financial management and HR management are in place to support the delivery of the Minister's priorities. In addition to the Permanent Secretary, board membership includes 5 Deputy Secretaries, the Chief Executive of the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, the Department's Finance Director and 3 non-executive board members. In terms of our budget for 23-24, our opening budget allocations were just under 580 million resource departmental expenditure and just under 116 million capital DEL and also 35.9 million of resource depreciation. That resource budget also includes 351 million of additional allocations from Treasury to support agriculture, agri-environment, wider rural economy and fisheries in Northern Ireland, as well as implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol and Windsor Framework. And Roger will elaborate more fully on the budget position in his briefing. In terms of the size of the department, our estate, the Dare estate, covers 84,000 hectares with over 850 estate assets across 230 sites. Dare has approximately 3,215 full-time equivalent staff, with approximately half of these staff are general service and the remainder being professional and technical staff grades. So that's, for example, vets, lecturers, scientific grades, accountants, etc. Significantly, the department is also managing 337 registered vacancies with our HR, and that's spread across the organisation. The department comprises 5 groups and 2 agencies. Our agencies are the Northern Ireland Environment Agency and Forest Service, and the groups which are led at Deputy Secretary level are the Strategic Planning and Corporate Services, Food Farming and Rural Affairs, Veterinary Service and Animal Health, Environment, Marine and Fisheries, and Climate Change and Science and Climate Change, Science and Innovation. So maybe just moving on then to the group that I am responsible for. So Strategic Planning and Corporate Services Group has responsibility for a range of services, the majority of which are enabling functions that support other areas of the department to undertake their work. Fiona McCandless and I are joint head of group, and the work of the group includes Digital Services Directorate, which develops and delivers information and IT services to support business areas to achieve their objectives effectively through digital channels. Finance Director led by Roger, which plays an integral role in delivering the department's strategic outcomes, especially as it continues to face budgetary pressures going forward. And this revolves around 5 key themes of strategy, financial management, value for money, performance and corporate compliance. The Corporate Planning and Governance Directorate, which is responsible for delivering high-quality corporate services to the department and plays a key enabling role in delivering a well-led, high-performing and outcome-focused department. The Director is also responsible for the sponsorship and government of most of Dare's arm's-length bodies. The Strategic Support Directorate is responsible for supporting the delivery of strategic high-quality communications and engagement for the department, and by supporting the development of our capability and capacity, and plays a key enabling role in delivering a well-led, high-performing and outcome-focused department. The Northern Ireland Food Animal Information System Directorate is responsible for ensuring the continuing support for animal and veterinary public health programmes and access to local and international product markets. The Windsor Framework Implementation Unit, which is responsible for overseeing and supporting the full delivery of the department's Windsor Framework responsibilities, and the State Transformation Directorate, which is responsible for premises maintenance, health and safety and the longer-term transformation of the Dare estate. The Strategic Planning Corporate Services Group has around 317 full-time equivalent staff, and for 23-24 a budget allocation of just over 61 million in resource DEL and just short of 58 million in capital DEL. So maybe just, I'm happy to pause at that point if you want, Mr. Chairman, but Roger would then pick up on the budget.
Yeah, I think we'll go under Roger if that's okay, and just hear the full thing.
Good morning, everyone. I propose to take you through an overview of how DARE's final budgets for 23-24 are broken down, and they're in the slide pack that was sent through. I think the Chair said it was Annex B. Conscious there's lots of figures in this. I propose to go through each slide in turn, draw out some of the key points, and then I'm happy to take questions at the end. So the first slide then is at the very highest level, the 3 budget categories that we have to manage. The largest is the non-ring-fenced resource DEL, that's 600.7 million. Then we have the ring-fenced resource DEL, and that's non-cash depreciation of 38.8. And then with capital DEL of 97.4, and that gives 736.9 million DEL in total. So I'll then drill down as we go through the rest of the slide pack, and the next slide sets out how this 600.7 million resource DEL is broken down. The top line there is our business as usual. That's the funding that we receive from the executive. That's 244 million. We then have 4 earmarked pots from Treasury, the largest being the funding for agriculture, agri-environment, wider rural economy and fisheries. So that's the replacement Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 funding, as well as EMFF on the fisheries side. So that's ring-fenced for these purposes, so it can't be spent anywhere else, and that's 328.5 million. We then have 3 sets of other funding from Treasury to take forward the work on the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Windsor Framework, and that comes to 600.7 million in total. The next 2 slides then break down the funding that we get from the executive, and it's split between income and expenditure. So starting with income, and the largest income we receive is on the carrier bag levy of 13.1 million. We then have salvage income from cattle of 12.2. There's then regulatory income on the NIEA side of 10.1. And I suppose the 4th largest then is the work that the vets do in the inspectors in the meat plants. We do that on behalf of the Food Standards Agency, and then they pay us for doing that work. So it comes to 59.1 million in total. I suppose the largest part of the department's budget is on running costs, with salaries being the most significant element of that, almost 160 million. And then, as Brian says, we've got a large department, 84,000 hectares, 850 estate assets and 230 sites. So there's lots of running costs and general admin expenditure associated with that, and they're the other elements of our running costs. Forest Service is an executive agency, but in terms of budgeting and accounting, it's classified as a public corporation. That was done a few years ago by the Office of National Statistics. So we only score in budgets the subsidy and any capital grant that we allocate to Forest Service. So that's 2.2 million. The next slide then breaks down our funding to our 4 ALBs, or NDPBs, the largest being AFBI. Now, I suppose AFBI's running costs are roughly split into 2, where the staff and running costs relate to research and development. They can score in capital under ISA 10. This was a Treasury change in budgeting treatment from around 2015-16. So all those staff and running costs score in capital, and we'll see them in the capital slides later on. But the other normal, I suppose, running costs score in resource, and these are set out there. We then have the LOCS agency, and it's 50-50 funded with the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications from the Republic of Ireland. And then our 2 smaller NDPBs of LMC and NIFA, they largely pay for themselves from the income they generate, but they sometimes need a top-up in year, so they've got some additional funding from the department this year. Turning to our programmes, and the largest one is the bovine TB programme, with compensation being by far the largest element of that at 36.9 million. Included in that programme is the funding that we pay to the private veterinary practitioners of 11.8. We then have environmental projects. So this is the funding that we get in from the carrier bag levy. So you'll see it was 13.1 million in the previous table. So the dispensation we got from Treasury when this levy came in was that it had to be spent on environmental projects. So that's where that funding goes. Can't go anywhere else. And then there's some smaller elements there. The total 68.8 million, and that totals to the overall executive funding of 244. The next page looks at the earmarked funding. And this is, as I said earlier, the replacement Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 funding. To start off with, the largest element of that is the direct payments that go to farmers from the beginning of September each year, 298.8. The second element there is the Rural Development Programme. So we were still drawing down money from Europe there until the 31st of December, just passed, and that's now all stopped. But there was still funding being drawn down this year, and that was 11.5 million. In terms of new projects that are being taken forward, that's 5.6 million, and then we've the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme is the next largest element there, and that comes to 325.4 in total. And then the Marine and Fisheries funding is separate of that, 3.1. The next slide then breaks down the three elements of the funding that we get from Treasury in relation to the Windsor Framework and the Protocol. This was the 9.7 million. We've had that funding for a number of years now, and that just rolls over, and most of that's for staff costs. The Windsor Framework funding, this was an exercise that was undertaken in the autumn following the Windsor Framework agreement earlier last year. So we only got confirmation of that in January, and that totaled 4.7 million. And that's split between largely in the department staff costs and those in Forest Service. And then we also have earmarked funding for the points of entry work that's undertaken between the department and AFBI, and a smaller amount in Forest Service. That comes to 28.2 million in total. The next slide then just slices the budget in a different way across each of the 6 groups within the department. You'll see Food and Farming and Rural Affairs group is the largest there, and that's because of the large earmarked funding, the replacement Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Next we have Veterinary Service and Animal Health group, and that's large because of the bovine TB programme. And then Brian's group is next, and that includes AFBI in there as well. On the capital side, the largest element's also in Brian's group, and that's because of AFBI and also the investment in our digital transformation programme. So the next slide just gives an overview of what we've done this year. So you recall that the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland announced a budget for all departments back on the 27th of April, and as part of that there was a 1.5% or 3.5 million cut for us on our non-earmarked funding. So our approach to finding that cut was to protect core frontline services as much as possible. So we looked at our savings in our running costs, and each of the grade 3s had to find 10% within their group, and AFBI had to find their pro rata share as well, which was 0.4 million. We also had an increase in tuition fees from previous decisions, and that was just feeding through to this financial year, and that raised an extra 0.3 million. But the cut wasn't the only thing we had to fund. We had new inescapable statutory obligations on TB compensation, on the Office of Environmental Protection and MABOI, as well as inflationary pressures. And you recall inflation was very high at the beginning of the year. In February it was 10.4%. So we had a much higher funding gap to manage than just the 1.5% or 3.5 million cut. So in terms of the new statutory obligations on the OEP and MABOI, we had some savings in cap disallowance because we have much less EU funding to disperse. So there was savings there, so they were reallocated to fund those. We also have a pay award to manage, so we didn't know what it was at that stage. I suppose we still don't know what the final outcome of that will be, but our planning assumption at the beginning of the year was to reduce overtime and agency costs to help cover this. And then the main pressures at the start of the year was on the TB programme of 10.4 million. You can see there that TB compensation at the end of last year was 38 million, and that's almost double what it was only a few short years ago. And then inflation, which, as I've mentioned, especially on our utilities and our running costs across our estate. So in the absence of formal DOF monitoring rounds during the year, we undertook 3 internal monitoring rounds with roughly the same timescales, and worked with business areas to manage the 19.1 million pressure down and we had it down to 2 million in the latest return that we sent to DOF at the beginning of February, and this was in relation to TB compensation. And you may be aware the executive agreed to fund that last week when they met. So we're now on course to live within our budget this year, and our focus is on spending out all the various pots within that. So the next slide, I've just given an overview of what happened during the year, and I suppose just to emphasise the context, it's been extremely difficult from a budget management perspective. Never had a 19.1 million funding gap at the start of the year. Usually you have a balanced budget. So it's been probably the most challenging in my time in the department. In the absence of ministers, Katrina, as Permanent Secretary and Accounting Officer, made a number of decisions to help live within this budget. And they're set out in the table there. The ones with cut noted after them, that helped fund the 3.5 million that we had to find at the outset. And then the other savings or actions were taken to help manage our statutory obligations and our contractual commitments. And they came to 10.5 million in total. The next slide then looks at staff and just shows at the end of January how full-time equivalents of staff are across each of the 6 groups, with the largest being in Food and Farming and Rural Affairs group, and I suppose the smallest being in Climate Change and Science Innovation group, which was only just created there in the autumn. It's also worth noting that because of the opening 19.1 million funding gap, the Permanent Secretary also decided to remove 450 vacancies that were registered on NixHR at the time, and they were removed in May. And I suppose these were registered from previous years where we were anticipating an uplift in funding for things like green growth. But because we had that gap to manage, it was no longer sustainable to keep them there. So they were removed, and that's had big impacts right across each of the groups throughout the year. And it's also worth noting, because salaries is such a big part of the department, that every 1% of a pay award creates a new 1.9 million pressure just to stand still. So we have to find that. And part of that, we've looked at reducing overtime and agency reductions as well as not replacing leavers to help manage that during the year. So turning then to capital, we've broken the capital budget down into a number of different categories, with the first one being green growth, and that's 17.4 million in total, with the largest element that on the agri-food side, and within that the largest element is the Farm Business Investment Programme of 8.3 million. The next group is programmes. You can see a number of fairly small programmes within there, with the largest being the Environmental Farming Scheme of 3.2. Over the page, and then we're on our IT systems, and we're continuing our significant investment in our digital transformation programme, and there's also ongoing work with NIFIS, which went live last autumn, and also the information system for laboratories in AFBI, NIA and DARA. The one is Island, and the contract in it was let early last year. Given the size of our estate, we have a number of key projects that are due to take off in the coming years. So it's quite small at the moment, but they're due to ramp up in future years. So the cost this year are 6.2 million. Then on the research and development side, I'd mentioned previously that if your costs score, they meet strict Treasury criteria for scoring as research and development, then they can score in capital. And roughly around half of ASPI's budget can do that. So that's why they're the largest in there. We also have other collaborative and other research in the department as well, bringing that up to almost 23 million. Then the final table, you'll be pleased to note, is just on our recurring capital. So that's our investment in our plants, vehicles and machinery right across the department, with the largest element being their replacement research vessel in AFBI. The current vessel is over 30 years old, so it's ready for being replaced. So that's an overview of our final budgets for 23-24, following the additional funding that we got from the executive last Thursday. Those budgets were reflected in the budget bill that was introduced to the Assembly last Monday, and I provided separate briefing on that to accompany these slides. So the focus now, as I've said, is in business areas right across the department and spending out all these budgets, obviously without overspending. And then finally, the last slide is just an overview for next year, which is not too far away. So the block currently has 13.8 billion on resource available, which is a slight increase on the opening position for 23-24. That's before the executive package is taken into account. There's also 1.8 million capital available, but that's a significant reduction on the opening 23-24 position. What we do know is that the Treasury earmarked funding for agriculture, agri-environment, wider rural economy and fisheries has been confirmed for next year, and that's 332.5 million, and that's a slight increase of 2.3 million on 23-24. Our starting assumption for next year is flat cash, and that's 230.8 million for the department, and that's excluding all the Treasury earmarked funding. What is new for next year is that the Government Actuaries Department has undertaken a review of the Civil Service Pension Scheme, and employer pension contributions have to increase by 4.2% to a flat rate of over 30% from April. And because of the number of staff within the department, that's creating a new 5.5 million pressure. On capital, the exercise will be from a zero base as usual. But given the amount of capital available and things like construction inflation, we'll probably not get as much capital budget as we like. But we're currently working through the budget exercise, and we'll come back to the committee to brief on next year in due course. So that concludes my presentation on the budgets for DAERA. I'm happy to take any questions on any of that.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian and Roger. That was very intense, I suppose, for our first briefing, but it certainly sets out the difficulties and the pressures that there are within the department. A couple of questions just from me initially. So I'm assuming from those figures, the implementation of the Windsor framework basically is paid for by the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, but is claimed back from the Treasury. Is that fair, or is that?
No, it comes directly from Treasury to yourselves, so it's through DOF to yourselves, so it doesn't come from DEFRA.
It doesn't come from DEFRA, it comes from Treasury?
It does, yeah. Okay,
so in other words, if it's costing £1 million for part of the project, that automatically comes from Treasury?
For any running costs, we bid through DOF to Treasury, and Treasury make the allocations through DOF to us, so DEFRA aren't involved in
and it is
running
100%?
We haven't got all the bids that we bid for this year, but certainly on the points of entry, we've got everything we've asked for on it. And the first element, the 9.7 million, it's rolled over every year, so we've got all it. Okay. We didn't get all that we bid for on the new Windsor framework bid for this year. I think it was about 900,000 short.
Does that have to be covered by the DAERA?
Well, I suppose we bid for that back in around October time, and that was based on a number of assumptions around staff getting into post. So we only got that funding confirmed in January. So with the passage of time, it's worked out roughly okay, because the number of staff haven't come in line with the projections that were made last autumn. So we're not anticipating we're having to cover any shortfall from the rest of the department's budget.
Okay, so there's maybe a small shortfall, but not a significant one. Is that what you're saying?
I suppose we didn't get all that we bid for, but we've got enough to cover us this year.
So there's no shortfall?
So there's no shortfall yet.
Okay. And what about in capital terms? There's quite a bit of construction of new premises at Belfast, and I'm assuming Larne as well.
All the capital has been taken forward by DEFRA. So we bid for the resource for all the running costs because of all the vets and the other staff that are working there. But in terms of the infrastructure, DEFRA bids for that, and they get the funding and pay for that, so that doesn't come into our budget.
Okay. The over in TB 2023-24 financial position, it said 36.9 million. And I think you did indicate about some movement in that throughout the year. So I'm wondering, is that 36.9 million, was that the starting position, or is that the finishing position of the year?
That's the finishing. I suppose we've never been funded at that level. What's in the baseline is only 28 million. So we have to, and that's part of the opening gap that we had. So we've had to, scale back our running costs. We're not replacing all the staff that have left for one reason or another. So we could reallocate money to cover this. So we've had to find the vets also with higher reactors. The salvage income goes up as well, so that helps cover it in part. But the TB compensation was 19.5 million back in 2019-20. It was only 15.4 million in 15-16, so it was 38 million last year.
It's basically 2.5 times what it was back then.
It's gone up, it's really considerably since that time, and that's both incidents. It's been the highest in since foot and mouth in over 20 years, but also the market value has gone up as well. So it's a combination of both those. And it's a statutory obligation that we pay at 100%. So we have to, we have to find it. So we have to find savings elsewhere to cover it.
Okay, and finally for me, the new registration process for farmers, it's called NIFAS, NIFAIS, I think it is, that replaced APHIS. Obviously that's been in the making for a number of years. I see two different figures there. I think it's 1 million for maybe resource and 2 million for capital. Is that right? How much does that cost in total over the number of years?
So I suppose, Mr. Chairman, the project's been ongoing for quite some time. The contract was initially awarded back in 2016, and then there were a few challenges in implementing it. Overall project cost for the lifespan of the project, which takes us through to 2031, is £50 million, which is a mix of the costs associated with Capita, who are the contractor who's actually developing the software, but also those running costs for our own staff. So it's a whole cost for the system. Stage 1, as I mentioned earlier, and Roger did too, commenced on the 4th of September, and that's about 70% of the system. And stage 2, the planning assumption is that it will go live in June 2025, which will be the entirety of the system.
Okay. But it is live for those that are currently using?
The system is live, yes, and that 70% that it's live for includes around, and it's 70% of the functionality that would have been undertaken by APHIS in the past. So because the two systems run in parallel, the APHIS system is still operational.
Sorry, just to be clear, it's only doing 70% of what APHIS was doing?
It's in terms of the actual process of NIFAS becoming a standalone system. So we didn't do 100% of a flip over. APHIS wasn't turned off, so what we've done is we've moved certain aspects of what could be done on APHIS over into NIFAS, so that's about 70% of the functionality. The rest of that functionality will come into play in June.
Why was it not all processed over at one time?
Because it probably would have been too high a risk for us to actually do that. As some of your members will know, it's an incredibly complex system. What it does, it's also hugely important to the economy in terms of traceability and security for animals. IT systems are historically quite difficult to implement, and if we had implemented it in its totality and it didn't work fully, that would have been quite problematic. And in moving from APHIS to NIFAS, we actually had to move data, and if the data hadn't have transposed across properly, that would have created all sorts of problems for abattoirs, for marts, for foreign businesses, for our own staff who use it as well. So this was a planned approach, and always has been, that we would move it over in stages rather than a sort of big bang approach.
Finally, on that point, what was wrong with APHIS?
Well, it's not so much that there's anything wrong per se with APHIS, but APHIS has been in place since 1998. So it's a system that's been operational for over 25 years. It has certain limitations given that it's 25 years old, and it also wasn't integrating with some of the new systems that we have in the department. It was quite slow in terms of sort of trying to pick up. So it's really that the lifespan of APHIS had ran its course, and it did have a lifespan in terms of its business plan, which is actually due to run out.
Irrespective of its lifespan regarding the business plan, unless it wasn't doing its job, I can't see the reason for changing it. But I do hear what you're saying, that there were certain elements that it wasn't compatible with, maybe within the department. But it would be useful to hear a bit more about that at some stage, not now, but at some stage, simply because spending 50 million on a new system that maybe wasn't totally required, and I'm open to hear the arguments around that. I'm just wondering if the basis of it, that's all.
Yeah, and we've actually proposed to the Minister that we do seek the committee's agreement to come and provide you with a more detailed briefing around NIFIS, which we're more than happy to do.
That's fine, thank you for that. First one was Patsy McLone.
Thanks very much, Chair. And Brian led me on to a question that I probably wasn't going to ask, only it had been touched upon. Is Capita in charge of the entire transition scheme there?
Well, the department's in charge
No,
of
no,
the
sorry,
transition,
but
but
Capita is the agency.
Capita is the supplier that we use to help
Right.
us with our software development.
Okay, now, they had a cyber attack last year, and have they given you assurances that none of the details or that cyber attack in any way didn't compromise any of the transition stuff that they're handling for the department?
We did, and the lead for Capita at the time was a guy called Anthony King, and Anthony wrote to us to say, and not only us but to all of their clients, to say that the cyber attack that they had no impact whatsoever on the work that they were doing for us.
Okay, that's reassuring, and so far as they know that. Could I maybe just go through some of the items that have been raised in the budgetary issues, and maybe just start at the back end? TB became an issue there, and I heard, Roger, you mentioned the private veterinary practitioners. The payments to them was 11.8 million. How much does TB inspections account for within that 11.8 million?
That's the full amount that's paid to the PVPs. So if they're out doing their work, where they're
Right. Well, maybe I've not been clear enough. Is that exclusively for TB related matters, or are there other private practitioner issues within that?
it's my assumption that they go out and do the testing on the.
All I'm trying to get is that 11.8 million is just exclusively for private work carried out by private vets on TB testing.
Is
that
my understanding?
Right. So then the actual cost of TB to the public purse is 11.8 million plus 36.9 million in compensation.
Yes.
Yes. So right. No, that's okay. I just want to get that clarified. We've already dealt with the digital transformation issue. The R&D stuff, that's exclusively for use by AFBI, is it?
Well,
That's
under capital,
22.8 million.
yes, 30. So that's their staff. That's their staff. Their running costs associated with research and development. So
Okay.
AFBI have looked at the Treasury guidance, and there's strict criteria that they have to follow to make sure it can score in capital, and where that's the case, it can be funded out of the capital budget as opposed to resource.
Okay. Thank you for that. Then can I ask just the soil nutrient health scheme, the 7.5 million for that, and maybe just reverse back to it's maybe not the expenditure in that, but it's the how should I put it, the precautionary or measures within the department now to avoid any fraudulent practices which has been an experience that has been uncovered within the last year. Fraudulent practice around soil sampling provided to NIEA. I'm just trying to establish if, since those have been uncovered, has the department set in place measures to, insofar as is humanly possible, to prevent against such fraudulent practice?
So probably that would be best picked up with colleagues when they arrive in terms of their own detailed briefing. So those who are responsible for the soil nutrient scheme, which will be, I think, the next briefing here next
Well, that's
week.
grand. That's okay. And then finally, something very close to me geographically and near to my heart is Lough Day. Now, we've heard that we previously met your colleagues and we discussed with them. They said, that was back on December the 15th, they said there was going to be a programme of action involving some 113 recommendations for various levels of actions, both by the department and indeed other affected departments such as DFI. I'm wondering, has the department set aside any money or earmarked any money or looked at what the potential costs of the rectification process might be, measures that are needed to take by the department both in monitoring and actual actions to prevent or help, at least in the initial years anyway, mitigate the worst excesses of what we saw was the algal bloom on Lough Neagh last year?
I suppose, as I said in the last slide there, we're currently working through the budget exercise for next year. So proposals are coming in from all, from all grade 3s, including the ones that are involved with Lough Neagh, and we'll be pulling that together and then discussing proposals with Minister then to bid to the executive as appropriate. But we don't have any budgets for next year yet, so
yes, I get that, but you are anticipating some allocation of budget towards measures that will help address the issues that we've seen last year, particularly in Lough Neagh.
Well, I'm anticipating bids coming in to cover that, and then that'll be in the mix with everything else, and we'll be bidding for that and making the case to get additional funding into the department to cover that.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Declan. Clear.
Thank you. Just want to clarify something and also ask a question. The HMT earmarked for the agri environment, the 332.5 million. Does that include for the single farm payment? It does include that. And are you familiar with in the department or in your engagement with HMT about what will happen next year for that?
Well, we have got confirmed 329.4 million for that, for the Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 replacement funding. So Treasury has confirmed that. There's been that takes us up to the end of the current spending review, so it'll be up to the next spending review, and we'll be engaging with DOF and Treasury on that as we go through this year, and we prepare for 25-26. But there's been no clarity for any of the devolved administrations on that yet.
And do you see in relation to in your presentation they had the Pillar 2 replacement funds 5.6 million, that's 23-24.
Yes.
What sort of projects are we talking about in that Pillar 2 replacement funds?
So within the 5.6, the largest is the beef carbon reduction scheme, which was launched there at the beginning of January. So that's 2.3 million. There's also the farm carbon benchmarking of 1.5 million. Then there's smaller items, the Northern Ireland Regional Food Programme, 0.2 million. The Generations Programme, 0.3, and then there's technical assistance in there of 1.3, so that comes up to 5.6.
Thank you for that.
All right, Declan, thanks. Anya?
Yeah, just a quick one from myself, Roger, and again I'm looking a wee bit of clarity. Based on some of the slides there, the 23-24 final budget position earmarked for 1.4 million, for TRIPSI. In 22-23, this was 7.23 million. Again, if I'm not mistaken, am I right in saying that this is a 5.83 million pound cut?
Sorry, 22-23, it was
7.23.
23 million. Was that? I don't have those figures in front of me. Was that all resource, or was that an?
I'm not too sure, but look, I'm happy for you to even get back.
We'll take, the resource is usually around that amount, around 1.4. There would have been more in capital at that stage, but I would need to check that out, and happy to come back to the committee.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. John, Blair.
Thank you, Chair. Brian, Roger, good to see you back to the committee doing business after a considerable gap, and good to see Shauna with you here today as well. I hope you're saying the same about us after our questions today. I have a couple of fairly direct questions to start with, and then more for a third question of a general area or theme. So we'll start with, in previous years, and I'm recalling 21 to 22, there was a considerable underspend in the climate action budget. Can we given an assurance, and to what extent can we be given an assurance that that will not happen either this year or next year, and that those monies will be fully utilised?
Is that, I think, 21, 22?
Is it 2 million underspent or something at one time? I remember raising it, so I'm looking for an assurance that that's been fully utilised, basically.
I think that might have been around green growth at the time, in which case it was just starting out at that stage, and there was a number of capital projects where when the bids were being made, I suppose you make bids at a certain point in the year, and that's usually before the start of the year, and you hope you get your business cases and all your approvals and all in place before you can actually go out and spend the money. So when the bids were being done and then the allocations were being made, there was probably a bit of optimism at that stage, which is always the case in a new programme. If there was an underspend in those years to that amount, then it just couldn't be taken forward within that financial year. I understand as part of the 24-25 exercise, bids are coming in those areas, and we'll be hoping now that a few more years have passed that what they're bidding for can be spent in that year. You'll have seen from the capital table on green growth, we have spent 17.4 million this year, so there is evidence of spending now.
It's something the committee can continue to review, and I'm happy to do that, but thank you, Roger, for that. The next question is on the estates, and it's been detailed here on a previous occasion, the size and complexity of the Dara estate. Can I ask if there's been an estate's efficiency review done? And I suppose to narrow that down a bit, has there been a bang for our buck review of the number of buildings, the number of people in them, and the product that's coming from that? Or to put it in a different way, how sure are we that there aren't large buildings within that estate being run and heated and maintained, and they remain large buildings with fairly small numbers of people in them? And have efforts been made to try and share those with other departments or agencies so that they become more efficient and more cost effective?
I suppose that when you look at the estate for Dara against the estate in which many of our colleagues are in, that estate's owned by the Department of Finance. A lot of those buildings, so the estate that we would talk about is largely things like our forests. There's very few offices per se that we would own. Obviously there's the estate. Some we do, but very, very few. But you then have the Caffrey estate, both in Loughry and Greenmount and down in Enniskillen. And then a whole raft of other things that we have responsibility for, like Afby's estate, etc., etc. We are actually undertaking a fairly extensive review of our estate at the moment, probably around about 2/3 complete, and that's for us to actually understand what is within the ambit of the estate, and indeed if there are any efficiencies that can be made. There are some buildings which are incredibly old, and indeed actually we have had to vacate because they are so old, and the cost of maintenance is prohibitive, and they also have to be looked at. But I think that our estate, in terms of our office estate, is under continuous review. We clearly want to make sure we maximise it, and at the same time we want to make sure that it's as efficient as possible. And just maybe to give you an example of that, I'm based in Jubilee House up in Ballykelly, a building that is in place since around about 2018. I might have picked up in the media recently that the Department for Work and Pensions, in conjunction with the Department for Communities, is actually going to take part of that building to be able to deliver benefit services for DWP. So that's us trying to make sure that we use our estate and have it maximised as far as we can, to ensure the very thing that you said, John, which is we don't want to have buildings which are being heated with light and are not fully utilised.
Yeah, I put a supplementary on that, then, if you don't mind. You mentioned earlier in the presentation the subject of agency costs. To what extent can the department control the expense of agency costs? And I wasn't sure in the presentation whether the agency cost reduction that I saw related to agency staff cost reductions or NDPB, NGO type agencies funded by the department. Because it strikes me that some of the agencies operate in fairly substantial premises, whilst the civil servants in the core of the department, if you like, have been moved around from one shared business area to another. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's an efficient way to do it most often. So can you review the cost of the agencies in terms of their proportion of their grants that relate to their premises and estate for themselves?
So I suppose picking it up at the high level around, so the two key agencies that we have within the department would be Forest Service, which is based down in Enniskillen, and the Northern Ireland Environment Agency.
And external agencies, I'm referring
And we
to.
also we also have those like AFBI as well. Yeah. So in terms of the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, they're actually in the process of finalising their vacation of Klondike building in Belfast, which was their headquarters. And will be up until the end of March, and their staff are going to be split by and large over two sites. One is the Water Management Unit down in Lisburn, and then a number of their staff are going to Clare House, just out at Sydenham Road. So again, I suppose that just underscores what we're trying to do is maximise the estate, reflecting on a hybrid working, which has also got an impact because quite a number of our staff across not only this department but the NICS have availed of the hybrid working policy. And there are many different patterns in terms of how people work. We then look at the estate in terms of our agency, and AFBI, as Roger said earlier on, is our biggest estate, and there are over 6 locations. And again, there's a variety of accommodation that they have. One of them is a functioning farm, which is quite important around research and development, and they work closely with CAFRE. They also have the research facilities up in Hillsborough, which is pretty much largely research. But then they have their New Forge building, which is quite old, and we have been actively working with AFBI to look at alternatives and what we can do with that element of our estate going forward. Okay. So the estate, just in its broadest terms, always looking at it, those that are within the department and those that are with our agencies. And I should say the AFBI estate is actually owned by the department as well. It's not that it's owned by AFBI.
Finally, and this is one that I might have to take up with a specific business area, and I'm happy to get more information from fisheries. But I'm struck that perhaps fisheries on the charts we saw, or marine fisheries, might have shown some savings. I'm acutely aware that the department's public angling estate is barely functioning. It's not being stocked because of a zebra mussels problem. The community outreach grants that were available, and I've taken this up previously with the Permanent Secretary, the grants available to the more vulnerable and more isolated in our society have been frozen indefinitely, and I see that as a negative. Low-hanging fruit, but a pretty big impact. Have those costs been absorbed into long-term savings, or is it envisaged that they will be reinstated sometime in the future, particularly in relation to the community outreach activity and the public angling estate maintenance and protection?
Probably way beyond my knowledge, if I'm being perfectly honest, and I think as you said yourself, it would be helpful to pick that up with the business area.
But it's an estate that is pretty substantial. I mean, we're talking the entirety of Lough Erne, for example, and a number of other pretty substantial fisheries providing a public service.
We'll make sure that's picked up in the briefing by that team. Yeah.
Just before bringing William Irwin's next, before we do that, Jubilee House in Ballykelly, how many DAERA staff are based there?
Around about just over 400. That's their location. It doesn't mean there's 400 in every day, in part because people will be not in the office, so they're on leave, they are either sick or they're out actually doing their work. And when you take hybrid working into consideration, it's not full capacity every day in terms of bums on seats.
How many was it originally meant for?
Just over 400.
Okay, so it's full to capacity?
In terms of that is people's office, headquartered office location, pretty much so. I'm happy to come back, but as far as I'm aware, it's pretty much that's the headquarters for around about 400 staff, yeah.
Okay. So if you're going to bring more in from other departments?
So the reason that we're able to do that is because of hybrid working. In part, so the building, and we have, as I said, a range of hybrid working and alternative working patterns across the department. So there are 3 floors on the ground floor, first floor and second floor in Jubilee House. We're only given over the second floor to the Department for Work and Pensions, and we believe that with hybrid working and people being in and out of the building, that is sufficient to meet the capacity for the department.
I know the move to Clare House from what was left in Dundonald House, or more or less. Was that always the intention, or was the intention to move totally out of Dundonald House altogether to Jubilee House?
No, so it was two bits to this. So whenever we were doing sort of what I would call the decentralisation, a number of posts and roles moved to Jubilee House, and people who didn't want to move were given the opportunity to move elsewhere in this department or into other departments. The move that we've had out of Dundonald House was accelerated because of a construction issue, where we had some concrete that came off the top of the building. So there had been a plan for us to be moved into Clare House over a period of time, but that was accelerated because we're no longer allowed to access the building. So I had to move that forward, as we've done. So we haven't been in Dundonald House.
Was headquarters of DAERA Jubilee House or Clare House?
It's actually both, and believe it or not, we actually had 3 headquarter buildings when we had Klondike as well, but we'll move to Clare House and to Jubilee House.
Yeah, it sounds like the amalgamation of some councils. Sorry, William Irwin. Apologies, Nicola.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the Chairman and Patsy has covered a couple of questions that I was going to ask. But in relation to NAFIS C2 million, is that ongoing payments towards the capital of or is that extra payments, or is that added payments?
That'll be the payments for 2023-24. They're the payments go out during that year.
That's not the overall cost?
No, the overall cost for NIFIS by the lifespan of the project through to 2031 is around about £50 million.
Okay. I suppose maybe it's not the place to ask this, but is all the issues around NIFIS ironed out? I know there's vets and a lot of people had some issues in relation to NIFIS. Speaking to a vet yesterday morning, and he told me there's still issues. What were you on with resolving those issues?
No, there are continuing issues, and particularly performance issues. And I suppose with any large IT change programme, we could anticipate there being issues with it as it sort of starts to bed its way in. We couldn't really quantify those at the time. And we did put in place on the 4th of September what we call a hypercare team. We brought in actually some staff from India, where Capita have some staff who work in this project, as well as some who were here in Northern Ireland. And as those issues were brought to our attention, we have been rectifying them, but they're not all rectified. There are some performance issues, and we are prioritising those. I suppose I would hope that the committee could take some comfort from the fact that we actually haven't lost a day in an abattoir or a mart since we launched NIFIS in the 4th of September. There have been some issues with individual farm businesses or vets actually getting registered onto NIFIS, and one of the benefits of NIFIS is that you will now use the government gateway to register, which allows you to register to all government services. So there have been some difficulties, and we're working our way through those. But I think it would be fair to say that since the 4th of September to where we are today, quite a lot of those issues have been resolved, and there are pockets, and we're going to continue to work with people. And indeed, if you wanted to give me the details of any individual who was having a problem, I'm more than happy that I can get the team to interact with them. But the system is operating, and I do have some figures which because the chairperson has asked us to come back, I won't bother going through them all, but there are some positives in all of that.
Really, I suspect, and I may be wrong on this, that in any contract is there not proviso built in that the provider would be responsible for ensuring that all those issues are sorted out? Would there not be penalties or fines for that provider for when there are issues arise?
Yeah, so I don't really want to go into the contractual terms that we have with Capita, but there are certain clauses in it. But some of these issues are probably specific to the department and how we set ourselves up. So I wouldn't have the detail of what they all are, and
just suspect
become quite tactical.
Yeah,
but that does work both ways, I should say, as well, because Capita has maintenance payments that we have to make to them.
In relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol, the cost of 9.7 million and Windsor Framework for 4.7 million. Given the recent agreement with the UK government on checks, no checks on goods from the UK coming into Northern Ireland, will there not be a need for less staff in relation to checks?
So I suppose the checking regime that we have, and as committee members will know, we've been undertaking livestock checks coming through Larne for many years.
Not large numbers of those.
But we have been, checks are not, I suppose, something, I suppose the point is they're not necessarily new to us. And I know that when Robert Huey is here, our Chief Vet, next week, he will be able to talk about this in a lot more detail than I possibly could. I suppose what we do have to do is make sure that we're compliant with the law, and whatever checks that have to be undertaken in compliance with the law is what we have to do.
One would have thought of this, no checks and goods coming to Northern Ireland, you just wouldn't need as many staff. One would have thought.
Well, I suppose that from our point of view, we'll look at what we believe over a period of time, what the level of checking that does have to be undertaken, and we'll resource that accordingly. But I don't have the sort of detail around how many people that we do currently have in our SPS checking.
Okay, Nicola, apologies.
Chair, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Brian Roger, for your update there. I just have a couple of questions. You've actually covered most of what I wanted to ask as well, and I appreciate you saying that about NIFES, because I heard anecdotally as well about those teething problems, but issues that local farmers were having, and even staff were having as well, with using the new system. And it's natural enough when you're migrating from one system to another that you would come up with those teething problems, but I appreciate that you are working through it. And maybe if you can continue to update us on that there as we move forward. I want to go back to the 450 vacancies that the Permanent Secretary removed from the HR, I suppose, back in May, as a cost-saving exercise, which I understand. So I think how you explained it, Roger, was that they were expecting more funding because of green growth or whatever, and that you need those positions filled. With the Climate Change Act now passed, I'm assuming we'll need kind of more positions opened up in order to implement the changes there. How do we kind of square that there circle moving forward, or what, have you any plans in place for that?
So I suppose the removal of the 450 vacancies was an immediate action we took to make sure that we weren't exposed, that if they were all filled, that would have burst our budget for us, in essence. Since then, we've actually re-registered vacancies. There's now around about 337 vacancies as of the end of January that are registered with NICS-HR. But those vacancies, before they can go forward, have to be able to demonstrate that they're affordable and they have a funding stream. So Roger earlier on talked about the carrier bag levy, the £13 million. So that is a funding stream, as indeed what we would get in from Treasury and any of our other income. So at that stage, it was more of making sure we didn't expose ourselves as a department. They were removed. We put a new process in place around how we brought forward vacancies. So some of those have been re-registered since they were removed, and then there's other new vacancies for new pieces of work which have been added.
So it's not essentially like 700 vacancies, which was in my head there. There's 400, and then 450, and 300 you mentioned earlier. Okay. Well, the fact that those other vacancies are still there, is that affecting the day-to-day run of the department and the efficiency of the department?
Well, we wouldn't see them as vacancies. Once they were removed, they were removed.
But the 300 now?
Sorry, 300 now.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you just have that question again?
The 300 vacancies you have now, is that affecting the efficiency of the department at the minute?
They were deemed to have a budget, a stream, and that they were affordable. So as far as we're concerned, they were put forward, and we're working with our NICS-HR colleagues to fill those. And they're at I suppose a number of different stages. Some of them have maybe just commenced. Some of them could be at offer stage, where we're actually offering individuals work. So that's a constant churn for us.
Yeah,
so it is.
that's regular enough for the department. Okay. I just want to go back to Declan's point about the money that was earmarked, that is earmarked for the next financial year from the Treasury. So I'm assuming this is the replacement for the EU single farm payment, and for next year there's an additional 2 million, around 2 million added on to that. First of all, is that enough basically to cover what the EU had funded previously, and is it what was forecast of what we were promised back in the good old Brexit days, or what do you think?
Well, I suppose that was confirmed by Treasury as part of the spending review for the 3 years to 24-25, and that was based on what the funding that we had got in the previous period. So for Pillar 1, I think it was the last year that we got Pillar 1 funding, and that came in around 293.3 million. And for the direct payments, there's other Pillar 1 funding around CMO. common market organisation. And then the Pillar 2 funding was for the rural development programme, so they looked at it over the full 6 years and took an average of it, because I suppose the funding for RDP is slow to start and then it ramps up towards the end, but they took an average of that. So at the time there was a rationale for doing it, for the allocation, and the fact that it's ring fenced as well means it wasn't subject to cuts in subsequent years. So whether it's enough, we could always do more. Whenever I said earlier that we only have confirmed funding for next year, we don't know what's going to happen after that, but we'll be engaging with Treasury, with the other devolved administrations, and making a case for an uplift for future years. But that's all in the mix with everything else at the UK level.
That's fair enough. I just have one quick final question, which I think you answered with John anyway, but it's about the estates and Omagh, the Sperrin House is where Dara is located at the minute, and I know they're due to move over to the town hall. Is that a saving the Department of Finance are going to make, or will your department benefit from that there as well?
I honestly don't know in terms of Sperrin, the Sperrin building. I'm not too sure who the ownership sits with, but I would have thought that both the council and ourselves will generate some saving as a shared building in County Hall. Yeah.
It's leased out, so I'm just.
Well, if it's leased out, then it's more about, I suppose, part of the strategy is actually getting out of leases as well as they come to an end, which is exactly what we did with Klondike. That lease was coming up, so it was a natural exit point for us. To go to other accommodation, which is what they've done.
Okay. Thank you both for that. Thank you, Chair.
Tom McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the protocol, it has been mentioned and there's been some indication given on it. But if we look at the protocol, 9.7 million, one-shot framework, 4.7 million, points of entry, 13.8, comes to 28.2 million. They're good to get a breakdown of that, exactly what all that money's been spent for, or spent on, the amount of staff, and a detailed breakdown of exactly what that's for. And going forward, that should be reducing, I would have thought, and it'll be good to get a forecast of how the department feels that will be reducing right down. Again, bovine TV has bone mentioned, and whenever I look at the increase from 2019 till 2020 till now, sitting now at almost 50 million, surely it should wake up a call for the department to take some type of effective action to try and to reduce TB right across our farms in Northern Ireland. And can you give some indication as to what the department are currently doing to seek to reduce TB across the province?
Well, I mean, it is a very significant cost, and I think, as Roger has already said, we have a statutory responsibility to actually make, there is a legal requirement to make those payments. And indeed, as part of our overall efficiency plans that we've been introducing during this financial year, colleagues in veterinary service were seeking to reduce costs. However, at this moment in time, the legislation requires us to pay 100% in terms of where there are reactors in herds, etc., and cattle that is lost. I know when Robert is here next week, he will talk about TB being a multifactorial disease, and there are many aspects to it. And in some ways, he will be considerably better placed than I would be to talk about the steps that they've been taken to actually address TB as a whole. And I know that our Minister has got a particular interest in this as well. So hopefully you don't mind if I just sort of maybe pass it back to Robert when he's here next week, but we'll make sure that he covers it.
Yeah, well, I think one of the issues is that the farmer can't be penalised in a sense for any animals that goes down with TB. He must still get his full compensation for that animal, and there's some concern around that.
Okay, Tom.
Thank you.
Right, Patsy, did you want in briefly?
Just a quick one about Ballykelly. Any time I've ever been there, there's a wild pile of car sharing going on because there doesn't seem to be a lot of people about the place. How many people actually work at that location for the department?
So in terms of what's called a headquarters location, so that is their office, and we would use that, for instance, for things like travel and subsistence. That's the record of that. That's actually their office. How many people are in any one day varies, and hybrid working has actually...
Well, I get that, but how many people give that as their location place of work?
Around about 400.
So that's for 400 people, that's the place that they work, either in part or in total per week.
That is their headquarters location.
No, that's a different question.
But I suppose in some ways they're linked in
The
sense.
headquarters for forestry staff, as you've just outlined it, but the forestry staff don't all work from there.
And that actually happens as well in Jubilee House, because whilst that is some people's headquarter location, some of the roads would actually have you out 5 days a week. But you do need to have a headquarters location. All civil servants need to have a headquarters location. So that's, if you were asked to come in to an office, to your headquarters, that's the office.
Absolutely.
That they would actually
but
go to.
That's not, coming into your headquarters isn't the same thing as being your actual place of work.
And some people's, where they work on a daily basis,
I'm not dancing
will not be in the building.
All I have to do is look at that car park any time I'm there, and you go into the place and it's near empty. All I'm trying to figure out is how many people use that location as either their hybrid place of work, where they go to, or their full-time place of work, where they go to.
That would be 400.
So 400 people
That's their location, yeah.
use that place either in part or in total every week for their place of work.
I wouldn't say every week, but that's where they go to. For instance, if I take myself by way of example, I'm probably in that building 1 or 2 days a week only. The other time I could be in Belfast. I could be here today, as I am today.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that I am in 5 days a week, and very few people will actually be in 5 days a week, because I suppose if you go back to pre-COVID and you went into that car park was pretty much full. That was my experience, because I know where I had to park when I just couldn't get anywhere close to the building. Obviously with COVID, the building, whilst it remained open, the number of people that would have been in it in any one day was probably around about between 10 and 15 during COVID, and there was reasons why people had to be in, because their Wi-Fi wasn't good or they didn't have sufficient space in their house. And now that we've moved into a hybrid working policy, staff avail of that and may only be in the building 2 days a week. The other 3 days a week they could be at home, or they could be out and about. So that's sort of the makeup of the building. Now we will have figures that we retain around how many people are in on each day. We look at that so that we can manage the building. And what we found to date is that Tuesdays through Thursdays are the days when we have most staff in that building.
And that's the bulk of 400 people.
And that's the bulk of the people where that is their headquarter building, yes.
Okay, Patsy.
Okay, no, well, I'm sure we can pursue it elsewhere.
Just to let you know,
Okay.
just to let you know, the committee aren't moving there in the near future.
Thank God for
Maybe have a
that.
meeting there.
One just really final quick query from me, and I've seen a wee bit about climate change and the finances. Whenever at one of the climate change meetings, it was indicated that it was going to cost 2.3 billion between now and 2027 within departments. Now, it's not all Department of Agriculture. Have you used that budget line in place?
3 billion. Billion? Yeah, no, we don't have that in place. That's. I think that's for Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So that's.
That's for departments, and usually the lead department. So I'm wondering what budget line you have in place and from your department?
Well, that's. It's probably better that that group comes back,
climate CCSI. Yeah.
come back and discuss that.
Well, it is a budget issue because that's the figure that we were given. I think I know William was there. I think John was there. Declan might have been there. Patsy, at that meeting where it was told that it was going to cost departments 2.3 billion up to 2027. Not to talk of external funding requirements for businesses and householders.
I suppose the executive funding we get this year was 244 million, so that's a tenth of that figure, and we cover all those slides that I went through. That's what it covers. So, as part of the budget 24-25 exercise, we will be looking for bids to take forward the work that's needed on that. But it's not, there's only a finite pot for the executive. And there's lots of hands up for that. So
I appreciate your honesty. Okay, both Brian and Robin, thank you very much for your presentation, taking the questions. We do appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be having you back again, not too distant future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, members, we're still in public session. If we could go straight into the next agenda item, which is on subordinate legislation. I would ask for your patience in this to some degree as we go through the formal procedures in relation to each statutory rule. That doesn't mean that you can't have queries about the statutory rules. So agenda item 7, sorry.
So, excuse me, we should have some officials coming in.
Have we officials?
Is there some officials outside there? The officials are coming just in case there's any questions. We don't expect them to be briefing us as such.
I'm just going to look at the toilet too, okay?
Is your right hand?
Not recently.
Really here just in case there's any issue with any of the SRs, so we're not quite really expecting. Closely.
Is any of them there to be here?
I don't know.
Do you hope we just raise it?
We don't want our fingers falling yet.
Yeah, we just need to be careful. What is it, the staff?
Just sit at the bottom of the table there, you're fine as well. We're not going to, it's not going
We'll raise
to
it.
be any further issue. If you just want to take a seat there. Don't.
You've got a brief.
Okay, members, this is agenda item 7, subordinate legislation, report by the Examiner of Statutory Rules. We have a number of statutory rules that the committee will need to address that have been laid in this mandate during dissolution. The Examiner of Statutory Rules has published a report which is at pages 169 to 233 of your pack. We will be addressing 13 statutory rules at this week's meeting and a similar number next week. I would like to highlight that the Examiner of Statutory Rules has not drawn any special attention to any of the SRs we are dealing with today in her report, so that is positive. We have a number of departmental officials available here today, which I would like to thank you and welcome you all for your attendance. If members need any further information or have questions on an SR, the officials attending today will deal with those backlog of SRs. Members, I would like to remind you that in usual circumstances we would have seen the SL1 in advance of the SRs being made. The SL1s relating to the SRs we are considering today are available for information in either your main committee pack or in the table papers. But we will now go through a number of statutory rules one at a time for consideration or approval. Do you have to do them individually as a formal process, members? Agenda item 7.1 is SR 2022-193. It's the Direct Payments to Farmers Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022. It's available at pages 234 to 239 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules has made no comments in respect of this regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Members, have you any questions for officials, or are you content that I put the question? Anybody any questions for the officials? No? Okay, I will now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022-193, the Direct Payments to Farmers Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022, and has no objection to the rule. Are you content? Mm-hmm. I need to hear you, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Agenda item 7.2, which is SR 2022-240, Direct Payments to Farmers Cross Compliance Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022. These can be found at pages 240 to 245 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rule has made no comment in respect of this regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Members, have you any questions for the officials? William?
These new cross compliance are these are no longer from Europe. These cross compliance penalties. These are new cross compliance penalties, I think.
Okay,
Right,
who's dealing with this particularly? Yep, if you want to come up here, thank you.
Can you just repeat the question,
Yes.
please?
Cross-compliance penalties. In relation to cross-compliance penalties, are these new cross-compliance penalties? Are they? I don't think Europe's cross-compliance penalties should no longer. Or are we still probably in this year, and maybe they do up to the end of this year?
It's still the same penalty regime, but what this SR did was remove the requirement to treat certain negligent breaches as intentional following repetition, and it was to make the penalty regime more proportionate. It's still based on the EU model. That model was devolved to member states at the time to make of it what they want.
There have been changes made to this to lessen the degree of penalties, isn't that right?
It's a lesser degree of negligent penalty.
Okay.
We do have negligent penalties and intentional penalties. Intentional penalties can be anything from 15 to 100% of all area-based scheme payments. Negligent penalties they're there to provide for the fact that even a good farmer makes mistakes, but the resultant treatment of them is intentional, even though an inspectorate might have found them negligent, meant that they were on the 15 to 100% group, so it was felt that that wasn't proportionate.
Okay.
This is the one that provided slightly softer approach to the farmer, is that right?
Yes.
Putting in my language.
but the main point is that intentionality of intent of intentional still remains. So if an inspector feels that something was done or not done deliberately, that'll still be reflected in the report and then the penalty applied.
Yeah.
And I would have thought it wouldn't be the inspector's place to judge that. That's a difficult call for him to do, isn't it?
It is. The inspector is technically trained. They report the extent, the severity, the permanence and the intent behind any breaches found, and that's the role that they have. The paying agency then, their role is to apply the corresponding financial penalty to that business.
Okay. That's okay.
Been up, William?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, any questions? Just when we have the official at the... No? Okay. I'll now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022/240, the direct payments to farmers cross-compliance amendment regulations Northern Ireland 2022, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content?
Great.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Move on to the next agenda item. It's SR 2023/210, and that is the direct payments to farmers cross-compliance amendments regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, at pages 246 to 252 in your pack. The Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comment in respect of this regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Members, have you any questions in relation to this, apart from, William, what you've just heard? Yes,
Chair,
thank you.
and don't worry about going over to the microphone. Do you see how would this SR apply to say farms that straddle the border or cross border? How that regime apply? If you have a farm in Vermont or somewhere which straddles across the border.
That no longer applies. There used to be cross-border reporting, and if a penalty was found in one member state, it would have been reported to the other. But these apply to holdings in Northern Ireland.
So, say for example, if on one side of the field is in the north and the other side is in the south, it only applies on one side of the field. Is that right?
It applies to the business who's claiming for that field in the north. Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, Declan. Any other questions? No? Okay. Now put the question to the committee that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2023/210, direct payments to farmers, cross-compliance amendment regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content? Thank you. Thank you very much. Next item is SR 2022/292, the Marine Protected Areas Prohibited Methods of Fishing Regulations, Northern Ireland 2022. Information can be found on pages 253 to 290 of your pack. Examiner statutory rules, no comments to make in respect of this regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Members, have you any questions for officials? No? Okay. Now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022/292, the Marine Protected Areas Prohibited Methods of Fishing Regulations, Northern Ireland 2022, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content? Thank you. Move on to SR 2022/303, Marine Protected Areas Prohibited Methods of Fishing Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2022. Information can be found at pages 291 to 294 of your committee pack. Examiner of Statutory Rule has made no comments in relation to this proposed regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Have you any questions for the officials? No. Now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022/303, the Marine Protected Areas Prohibited Methods of Fishing Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2022, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content?
Content.
Content, thank you. SR 2023/135, the Marine Protected Areas Prohibited Methods of Fishing Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023. Information can be found at pages 307 to 308 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comment in respect of the regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Have you any question for officials, members? No. Now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022/135, the Marine Protected Areas Prohibited Methods of Fishing Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content?
Content.
Thank you. Next agenda item is SR 2023/6, Packaging Waste Data Reporting Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023. Information can be found at pages 317 to 346 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules has made no comment in respect of this proposed regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Have members any questions for officials? No. I will now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2023/6, the Packaging Waste Data Reporting Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content?
Yep.
Thank you. Next item is SR 2023/25, the Packaging Waste Data Reporting Number 2 Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023. Information can be found at pages 355 to 384 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comments in respect of this proposed regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Members, have you any questions for officials? No. I will now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2023/25, the Packaging Waste Data Reporting Number 2 Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content?
Yep.
Thank you. SR 2023/106, the Packaging Waste Data Reporting Number 2 Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023. Information can be found at pages 390 to 400 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comment in respect of the proposed regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Have members any questions for officials? No. Now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2023/106, Packaging Waste Data Reporting Number 2 Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and there's no objection to the rule. Are members content? Okay. SR 2022/199, the Agricultural Student Fees Regulations Northern Ireland 2022. Information are on pages 401 to 423 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comment in respect of this regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Members, have you any questions?
Sure, just a quick
Yes,
comment on that. In relation to the cost savings that has been alluded to, and obviously the alignment with DFE, I just wanted noted that the cost savings are much more significant to DFE than there would be DEAR in relation to this. And as well as that, obviously there's specialised courses within CAFRE, and I just fear that this is putting in additional barriers to students who are looking to study those.
Because of the cost?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, have we an official dealing with? Yeah, please. Thank you for that. Did you get the gist of the question?
It needs some clarification because you're asking about savings to the Department for Economy. These are our regulations, so the department sets tuition fees for higher education, so there is no budgetary interaction with the Department for Economy.
Just in terms of, and to prod a wee bit further with that, essentially from a DERA point of view, is this not being brought in to bring DERA into essentially alignment with DFE?
That's right. Well, with the wider HE sector in Northern Ireland, so it's what's already charged in Queen's, UU and the FE colleges.
Do you accept that in that vein, going back to the tuition fees that obviously other colleges and the higher education sector don't offer the type of specialist courses that are offered in CAFRE?
There's a lot of specialist courses offered in CAFRE. There is some overlap with some of the food programmes that are offered at CAFRE, but yes, it is specialised. But what it does is it does align those fees that are charged at CAFRE with the wider sector. And in particular, I should highlight that prior to this alignment, CAFRE was delivering part of the Queen's Ag Tech degree under franchise, so they were already paying the amount set by Queen's. So this just brings the other fees for the courses delivered by CAFRE at higher education level up to that level, so it equivalises it. So.
Good enough on it? Any other questions? No? Okay, in that case, I will put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022/199, Agricultural Student Fees Regulations Northern Ireland 2022, and has no objection to the rule. Are you all content? Great, thank you. Okay, SR 2023/98, the Agricultural Student Fees Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2023. Information is at pages 424 to 460 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comment in respect of the regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Members, any further queries in relation to this? Assuming this is just this year's or last year's?
This is last year's, but last year's just applies to the inflationary increase, so it's just business as usual.
Okay. Now I put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2023/98, Student Fees Regulations Northern Ireland 2023, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content? Thank you very much. SR 2022/200, the Equine Identification Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022. Information can be found at pages 461 to 485 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comments in relation to the regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Due to the timings of this regulation, the previous committee considered the policy intent in the SL1 and were content for the rule to be made, and then it was led after dissolution, so falls to this committee to agree to the SL1 so that the SL1 is not in the pack. Unless members have any specific comments, I will immediately put the question. Any comments? No? Excuse me. I'll now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022/200, the Equine Identification Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content? Content? Okay, thank you. Okay, SR 2022/272, the scallop enhancement sites, prohibited methods of fishing regulations, Northern Ireland 2022. Information is at pages 486 to 498 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comment in respect of this regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Members, have you any questions for officials? No? I will now put the question that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022/272, the scallop enhancement sites, prohibited methods of fishing regulations, Northern Ireland 2022, and has no objection to the rule. Are members content?
Content.
Thank you. Okay, SR 2022/275, the sulphur content of solid fuel amendment regulations, Northern Ireland 2022. Information is pages 499 to 505 of your pack. Examiner of Statutory Rules made no comment in respect to this regulation, which is subject to negative resolution. Have you any questions for officials? No. I now put the question, the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SR 2022/275, the sulphur content of solid fuel amendment regulations, Northern Ireland 2022, and there's no objection to the rule. Are you content?
Yeah.
Thank you. Members, that ends the list of SRs for consideration today. However, there are now 2 statutory instruments to be considered, as explained by Ms Kelly, the Examiner of Statutory Rules, last week. These are not under her remit for consideration. However, the SIs are subject to an assembly procedure, in this case the negative resolution procedure. Clerk has therefore invited the relevant department officials to brief the committee on the SIs, and there is a briefing paper for this item in your table papers pack starting at page 289. The SIs are as follows. SI 2022-1173, the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Number 2, Order 2022, which is pages 506 to 524 of your pack, led before the Assembly 16th to the 11th 2022, and SI 2023-850, Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Order 2023, information pages 525 to 539 of your pack, led before the Assembly 21st of the 7th 2023. Mr. Coy, I invite you to brief the committee.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, members, just to advise on the procedure for statutory instruments. It's quite unusual for statutory instruments to be dealt with in this way. The UK Emissions Trading Scheme is a scheme that's been set up to incentivise emissions reductions within industries that are caught within scope, and it works on the basis of a cap and trade principle. It sets a limit, a UK-wide limit on the amount of carbon emissions that are available for companies to emit, and within that, companies then need to, installations within scope then need to either buy or sell allowances, or some of them get their allowances for free to meet their obligations under the scheme. Now, how the scheme operates is installations within scope, they need to continuously monitor their carbon emissions, and they report those to the regulator. In Northern Ireland, the regulator is the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. And then once the regulator is happy with the volume of emissions that have been declared by each of the participants, they then need to submit what's called carbon allowances for each tonne of carbon dioxide that they emit. Now, there are a couple of ways that they can obtain those carbon allowances. Installations that are considered at risk of carbon leakage, and just to explain in case members aren't aware of the term carbon leakage is where an installation might decide to move their production to a jurisdiction where there aren't any carbon pricing or lower or less stringent carbon pricing policies. So to mitigate against that, installations considered at risk of leakage are allocated a proportion of their allowances for free. their term-free allocation. And then any emissions allowances that they need to submit over and above that to cover their total emissions that they've emitted over the past year, they would need to buy on the market. And I suppose there's two markets. There's the primary market that's controlled by the UK government, and that's run every 2 weeks, and carbon allowances are issued for sale at that. And then there's also the secondary market, whereby there are some people who participate in the carbon market who don't actually need to use the allowances for themselves to cover their compliance obligations, but they're like brokers who would buy carbon allowances and then sell those on the secondary market. And installations can then buy their allowances on the secondary market as well as participating in the primary auctions. So that's a very quick summary of how emissions trading schemes operate. Now, these two particular SIs, they make various technical changes to the operation of the UK emissions trading scheme. Fairly insignificant, and certainly they don't create any policy change, they don't implement any policy change, and they don't add any additional burden to any of the Northern Ireland participants. So that's a very quick summary. Do you want me to elaborate on any aspect of that, or
Is this something brought in because of the Climate Change Act, or?
It's not, and apologies, Chair, I should probably have explained a wee bit of the history behind emissions trading schemes as well. So this all started back in 2005, whenever the EU implemented the EU emissions trading scheme, and the UK, along with the other 27 member states, were members of the EU emissions trading scheme up until 31st of December 2020. Prior to that, whenever we knew Brexit was going to happen, we, along with the other UK administrations, Scottish, Welsh and UK government, developed the UK emissions trading scheme, very much based on the EU emissions trading scheme, but they allow us to have an equivalent carbon pricing mechanism in place following the 31st of December 2020. So the UK emissions trading scheme was implemented on the 1st of January 2021. Based on the EU scheme, the only real difference was that there were 5% less allowances in the UK scheme at the start to try and demonstrate our climate ambition. But
they're even more stringent.
It was, but even though there were 5% less allowances available, there were still significantly more allowances in the system than what would have been predicted in terms of business as usual emissions from the participants within the UK. So it was perceived that there wasn't enough of an incentive within the design of the scheme as it was to align with our net zero objectives. So there's a commitment after we implemented the UK ETS to revise the UK ETS along the lines of the UK government and the devolved administration net zero objectives. So by and large, the net zero objectives are net zero by 2050, opposed as apart from Scotland, which is net zero by 2045. So we consulted in spring 2022 on redesigning the scheme to align the cap of the scheme and the trajectory of the cap, and the trajectory of the cap is how it declines year on year to take you down on that net zero trajectory to eventually get you to net zero. So we consulted on the design of that spring 2022. We issued a response to that consultation in July 2023 and stated our intention to implement the net zero aligned cap from the 1st of January 2024. Just to clarify, none of this has anything to do with the two SIs that are under consideration today. There will be future legislation that will need brought in to align the cap with net zero. So I say we aligned the cap with net zero 1st of January 2024, but we weren't able to change the regulations to allow that to take force because we didn't have the assembly procedures in place that we could do that. Legislation needs to be taken forward by all four UK administrations simultaneously.
Tell me, obviously these are traded. Can they be traded between Northern Ireland and the European Union?
Not at the minute, no. So they can be traded between installations, Northern Ireland and the other three UK administrations.
Okay.
There's a commitment within the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement that governs the trading arrangements between the UK and the EU for both the UK and the EU to actively consider cooperation on carbon pricing and to consider potential linking of the two schemes, should it be in both sides' interest. Now, to date, there's been no progress made in relation to that, but that would effectively create a much bigger market, obviously, and ensure, I suppose, parity of carbon pricing across between the EU and the UK.
You did say that you can get these for free. So I'm assuming somebody needs to get them to be able to trade them. So do they all start off as free with companies that are, have these carbon emissions, or what? How does that work?
Right. So whenever the scheme was implemented, there was obviously no allowances in the system. So it was implemented from the 1st of January 2021. The UK carbon market didn't actually open until, I think it was the 19th of May 2021. But companies prior to the market opening could make application to the UK ETS authority for those free allowances. Now, your free allowances are allocated based on a number of factors. So what's taken into account is your previous emissions, through your emissions history. So how much emissions you've generated in the past. So they looked at data that was available under the EU emissions trading scheme for those participants that were participating in that. And then they take a look at how your installation is operating compared to the other installations in similar industries against what's called a benchmark. And the more efficient you are in comparison with that benchmark, the more of a proportion of your free allowance or your allowances you get for free. Mm-hmm. And there's also another factor which is called your carbon leakage indication, or your carbon leakage factor. So if you're considered at risk of carbon leakage, then that's taken into account as well in terms of whether the amount of free allowances that you get. So those applications for free allowances were made by companies once the scheme was implemented. They didn't need to declare their emissions, the compliance for their first year's compliance, until 30th of March or 31st of March 2022. So they had between, I suppose, the 1st of January 2021 to get their free allowances, and then the market opened on the 19th of May 2021. So there was adequate time for them to get those allowances in the bank to be ready for the compliance.
So is this subject to all businesses, or is it only ones that have carbon emissions?
So it's basically heavy industry. So it is. So it's installations with a maximum rated thermal input of 20 megawatts or more.
Right. Okay.
So
okay.
So I suppose maybe.
Tom, you sort of had asked the question that I had in my head. Given the fact that we have an all-island energy market here, I can see it's not very challenging to neatly put the North in the UK ETS and the South and the rest of the EU not in the ETS, in the EU ETS, and given the different size of the markets, it's bound to put potential traders here in the North in a very serious disadvantageous position, because you have a much smaller UK market than you would have across all the EU. Is that right?
Well, yeah, there's a discrepancy in the size of the two markets, but you mentioned the electricity market there. So under the terms of what's now the Windsor Framework, electricity generating installations in Northern Ireland still need to participate in the EU scheme. So they're subject to the EU carbon price, and that's to protect the operation of the all-island single electricity market. So both north and south of the border, electricity generating installations are subject to the same carbon price.
Yeah, and see the carbon units. Then what are they based on? Where do they derive from?
Right, so the legislation when it was implemented, it's the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Order 2020. It's set year on year the number of allowances that will be available in the system, and those are created by the UK ETS authority. So the limit on the number of allowances that can be created year on year is set out in the order. So to align the order with net zero, those figures will need to be amended to reduce the number of allowances that are available year on year to ensure it puts us on that net zero trajectory. I suppose just to clarify as well, just to avoid any confusion, I said that we'd implemented the order or the net zero trajectory from the 1st of January 2024, but we hadn't been able to amend the legislation. There's separate Treasury regulations that dictate the number of allowances that are available for sale. Because of the financial aspect, those regulations are made under the Finance Act. So, pending the actual order being amended to reduce those number of allowances that are available, the auctioning regulations have been amended to reduce the number of allowances that are actually available physically, even though the order, as it stands, the actual parent order still says that you've got the higher number of allowances available. What's actually on the market are those that are available under the auctioning regulations.
Yeah. I think. Sorry, John, do you want it?
Very quickly, Chair. I recall that this, at the previous committee and many of the conversations which were more Brexit related than environment or climate related, and that's how I saw it then, and I think I'm still seeing it. There are a number of the Brexit conversations. I don't want to spend too much time on this mandate unless we absolutely have to, given other priorities. I see this, in summary, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is about minor amendments to facilitate accreditation and application by participants in the scheme. Is this right?
Yeah,
they're technical, but it's about verification and accreditation.
Yeah, technical amendments. I mean, they're not considered to be significantly more onerous in terms of burden on participants. If they were, they would have to be taken forward through affirmative resolution.
Yeah, okay.
I think, John, what I was going to say, actually, I think that's right. We've got into a bit of a discussion here today about the bigger aspects of the project, and I suppose maybe we shouldn't have, but because these are minor amendments, but I think for some of us that probably maybe aren't across the bigger picture of it, it was useful, but maybe we do need at some stage a more in-depth briefing on the overall aspect. So thank you for that. Do appreciate it. So members, I'll now put the question. The Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SA 2022/1173, the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Number 2, Order 2022, and has no objection to the statutory instrument. Members, are you content?
Content.
I'll now put the question on the second essay, that the Committee for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has considered SA 2023-850, the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Scheme Amendment Order 2023, and has no objection to the statutory instrument. Are members content?
Content.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Coy, for that. And we're sorry we got into maybe a bit more detail than we expected, but we'll have maybe a wider briefing at some stage.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, officials, you're very welcome to stay and see the rest of the committee proceedings, but you are welcome to leave as well. So thank you very much for your attendance. Okay, members, we move on to agenda item 8, which is correspondence. We'll now refer you to the correspondence memo in your packs at pages 541 to 542, and correspondence at pages 543 to 726 of your pack. Draw your attention to several items in the correspondence. I refer to pages 543 of your pack regarding the request from PCI Consulting to brief the committee. This is in relation to Moboy illegal waste site. PCI are retained by the residents living in close proximity to the Moboy illegal waste site. Members, are you content that we receive either a written or oral briefing from PCI and add it to the forward work programme?
Yeah, I think an oral briefing from them would be very helpful.
Okay. All content with that?
Content.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll build it into the forward work programme. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I refer to pages 544 of your pack regarding the request from the Northern Ireland Environment Link to brief the committee. Northern Ireland Environment Link is the networking and forum body for non-statutory organisations concerned with the natural and built environment of Northern Ireland. It represents 69 full member organisations. Are you content that we again fit an oral briefing into our forward work programme?
Sure.
All agreed? Thank you. I refer you to pages 545 of your pack regarding the invite from the National Trust to visit one of their sites and brief the committee. Are you content to add this to our potential list of visits in the draft forward work programme? Okay. All right, thank you. Refer to pages 691 of your pack regarding the request from the Office for Environmental Protection to meet and brief the committee. The Office of Environmental Protection was created by the Environment Act 2021 and extended to Northern Ireland by the Executive in February 2022. It is tasked with playing a full and independent role in protecting and improving the environment through holding public bodies to account. Following a meeting with the Minister, they would welcome the opportunity to meet with the committee and discuss the role. Are you content that we add an oral briefing from the Office of Environmental Protection to our draft forward work programme? You all content?
Yeah.
I did meet with them a couple of years after they came in here, so yeah, it would be useful. Okay, I refer to pages 696 of your pack regarding an invite from RSPB Northern Ireland to visit one of its sites and or to brief the chair. Are you content for me to meet and the vice chair and clerk initially with RSPB and would add it to potential list of visits?
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay. Page 697 of your pack regarding a request for Farmers for Action to brief the committee in an informal session. Steering Committee of Farmers for Action on behalf of the Northern Ireland Farm Groups would like to request an informal meeting with the Agriculture Committee to discuss the Northern Ireland Farm Welfare Bill at their earliest convenience due to the dire situation, decades of poor farm gate prices. Are you content that we add this request to an informal briefing of our draft forward work programme? All agreed? Okay. Members, I would refer you to pages 700 to 715 of your pack. Correspondence from Mr. Barry MacDonald, KC, regarding Victoria Square Residential Tower. It appears from his correspondence he is seeking to have legislation introduced into the Assembly to extend the limitation period for bringing claims on their defective premises, Northern Ireland Order 1975, to bring Northern Ireland into line with the position in England and Wales. He highlights that the residents of Victoria Square Residential Tower have been unable to occupy their apartments since they were evacuated in April 2019 following the partial collapse of a structure column, and that the claim against the builders and designers has been resisted on the ground that it was brought more than 6 years after the building was completed. He states that he has been advised by officials that DAERA is a relevant department. He has written to the Minister and appears to be seeking the support of the committee. From the clerk, I understand that he has also been in contact with the Justice Committee. Members, we would naturally need to be cautious with any matter where legal proceedings are involved or may be involved in the future. So I'm suggesting at this stage, before considering the matter further, that we would write to the department to seek a response from the department to clarify where the remit on this issue lies, and if or how the department is dealing with the matter. We also propose that we write to the Committee for Justice to seek what plans are for considering the matter. Have we any queries or?
No, Chairman.
It's strange that it would be our committee.
Sorry, William.
It just seems a bit strange that we would be our committee would be the committee responsible.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm suggesting seeking clarification, John.
Yeah, Chair, I'm content with what you've outlined there on the seeking the clarification, but I think it's fair then we can assume that we will be updated in relation to departmental responsibility, and also if any further consideration is required by this committee once those matters are clarified.
Yeah, okay.
Has this, do you know, gone to each committee, or is it maybe like an assembly or executive kind of thing they're looking at?
It has gone beyond justice. I just happened to speak to the justice.
We're just aware of justice, but it may have gone
Out
to
of curiosity.
I've no indication if there's a Chair's Liaison Committee coming up, but if there was, I could raise it there. He's all happy with the
that's
process?
good.
Okay. And just to, well, I suppose not committee business, but, there may be some members that will be contacted individually about this as well, I'm not sure, so, just bear that in mind. Okay, thank you for that. I refer you to pages 716 to 726 of your pack regarding the Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee. There is also a copy in the table pack starting at page 296 addressed to the committee directly. Correspondence states that it is the role of the Democratic Scrutiny Committee rather than statutory committees to examine and consider proposed new EU acts and proposed and published replacement EU acts. Statutory committees will continue to consider EU exit-related issues that fall within the functions of their department. This might include engagement on policy development and the scrutiny of the implementation of EU acts. So again, I think that's just telling us that they're now responsible for any new EU legislation that we need to look at. So are you content with that?
Yep, content, sure.
Certainly happy, content. I refer members to the table paper starting at page 72 for DERA's annual report and accounts 2022-23 with the covering letter. These were received after the pack went out. Are members content to note?
Content, sure.
Okay. Refer to your table paper starting page 307, correspondence from Pivotal, dated the 19th of February 2024. Pivotal is an independent public policy think tank in Northern Ireland. Pivotal has recently published a new briefing to coincide with the restoration of devolution, and the director, Anne Watt, has stated that she would be happy to meet with the committee to discuss its new briefing or any of Pivotal's other work. Are you happy that we get maybe a written briefing to start and then decide if we need an oral? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yesterday, the Ulster Farmers Union emailed the committee requesting an opportunity to speak with the committee about various policy issues and update them on the concerns of its members. Are you content that we add this to the forward work programme to receive an oral briefing from Farmers Union?
Content, sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are you content to action the remainder of the correspondences outlined in the correspondence memo, or is any member any specific area they wish to raise? No? Content? Okay. Please also note in the correspondence memo that some media articles that may be of interest. Members, the forward work programme is agenda item 9. I refer you to pages 728 to 730 of your pack for the forward work programme. However, since this was put in the pack, we've already had to make some adjustments and changes. Next week we will be hearing from officials from the DERA Food, Farming and Rural Affairs Group and from the Veterinary Service and Animal Health Group. This is brought forward from the 14th of March. That's due to the Minister not being available. Committee team will also now need to change some of the other departmental briefings and factor in new requests. We have agreed today briefings of stakeholders. So I propose that the clerk brings back a revised plan to next week's meeting. You content?
Content, sure.
Yeah.
And look, if you do have any specific issues, don't be afraid to send them into the clerk. Yes, Declan?
Jared, can I just ask, see in terms of the forward work programme, and particularly in the context of us looking at the new replacement rural development programme, at some point I'd like or propose that we would hear from some of the rural sector organisations like NERWIN and Rural Community Network and Rural Action, those rural stakeholder organisations and the rural networks as well, just to hear from them from the coalface, you know.
No, absolutely. I'm more than happy with that. Declan, Jan, we'll schedule that in. Obviously, it's quite a bit at the moment. Everyone's coming at us, so but we will. Yeah, if you're happy enough. We'll,
perfect. Yeah.
Anything else? No. Any other business, members? No. Thank you. Date, time, and place of next meeting is next Thursday, the 29th of February 2024, 10 a.m. in room 21. Thank you very much for your attendance, and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Committee Room 21. Sound.